Okay, my friends, this is very interesting. A NASA daring mission to intercept the God of Chaos asteroid as it closes in on Earth. Listen to the names of these things. OSIRIS-REx. This just came out December 27th. This is from NASA. Now let me tell you what happened with NASA and me and Yale. Okay, my friends, this could be a little deeper than I thought. NASA's daring mission to intercept the God of Chaos asteroid as it closes in on Mother Earth. Well, this is an asteroid in space that could possibly hit Earth, they're saying. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But why would NASA be interested in soft-bodied creatures and funding Yale? Okay, my friends, this was Yale putting out their paper a year after I posted all this stuff to them, saying, yes, there was exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures promoted by silica-rich oceans, and I'm going to go on to explain a little more of this in some detail. But this is a kind of a mumbo-jumbo paper. But the thing that interested me was who funded it. NASA. All right? NASA Astrobiology Institution Postdoctoral Fellowship. NASA Astrobiology Institute to Briggs. All right, he's the guy I dealt with, Derek Briggs. And I didn't really get anywhere with him, but they ended up saying, yes, it's all true. And it was all from a worldwide flood, silicon, all the things that I told them. So I thought it was unfair that they took all credit for it without even mentioning my stuff. And they even got it wrong. So you're going to see that. But that was the interesting thing about NASA. Now let me show you about the things that were said, and you can make your own determination. I present evidence, and I think it holds up my side of the story pretty well. I guess you'll be the one that has to make that decision. Here it comes. Okay, I had been working with Yale University, Derek Briggs specifically, trying to get him to look at my information. I presented this fascia facilitated fossilization paper to him in 2015, end of 2015. And I discovered this layer, which now they call the interstitium. Nobody knew about it. And I talk about fascia, and nobody was paying any attention to this. And I said it comes together as one giant system. It wraps everything individually in your body, which it does. They knew this. They knew about the fascia. They just didn't know about the fluid-filled highway. And this is what I came up with. Hold on a second. I'll show you. Well, before I do that, this is about the 50 times silicon in your skin, in your grip skin, and other places in your body. So I told him that there was a lot of silicon involved, and the fascia was what facilitated the fossilization. Now, fascia coats all these organs. It coats everything in your body, 100%. And that's how they preserved on that specific plane, on that fascia plane. All the other stuff, the gooey, tissuey part eroded away, but everything that was coated with fascia, organs like this lung, this lung was DNA tested, CAT scan, and everything. And anybody that understands what a lung looks like and where the heart is, this is a left human lung. The heart would have been there. The guy died laying like this, flat as a pancake because it was separated because of this fascia. Now, so I presented all this to Yale, and then I also pointed out that there were a fluid-filled highway. All right, I was doing all kinds of experiments on fascia, and this was my conclusion. It was fascia is a tubular, fluid-filled fabric network, a fluid-filled highway that runs through your whole body, and that's exactly what it is. And this again was 2015, and this was my paper I submitted to Yale, along with all my other evidence, the DNA tests and the CAT scans and all that stuff. Okay, so I am in communication with Yale, talking to them about my mud fossils, and I noticed Curiosity was starting to send back information from Mars. It landed up there in August of 2012 and started sending back pictures. Now, here's what they sent Curiosity up to do, which was a rover, and it was set out to answer the question, did Mars ever have the right environmental conditions to support small life forms called microbes? Well, why small? Maybe it had some big ones. Early in its mission, Curiosity's scientific tools found chemical and mineral evidence of past habitable environments on Mars. It continues to explore the rock record from a time when Mars could have been home to microbial life. Well, microbes, yes, but they were living on gigantic creatures. And this is what I sent to NASA. And then I find out that NASA goes to Yale to have them see if I'm a crazy guy or not. I think that's what it must have happened. If I'm wrong, somebody tell me I'm wrong. But that's too much of a coincidence. When I reported to NASA, probably it was 2014, somewhere around there, that I had found there, it could have been earlier, I don't know. But I'm going to show you what I did find up there, and it is life. It's all over there. And NASA said, this guy must be crazy. Let's go and see if Yale agrees or not. And of course, Yale did say, yes, perfect preservation can happen, but certainly not like that. It's only soft-bodied creatures. Now, what they told NASA, I have no idea. But here's what their paper is. I've shown this over and over again. Yale agrees with me about the perfect preservation, but they don't understand what precipitated it, which was the Venus almost hitting us, combusting our atmosphere, setting off a worldwide flood. All the silicates came up and all that business, and from the deep ocean, which is saturated with heavy silicates. It's a ooze, they call it, on the ocean floor. And it all came up, and then that's what caused this unusual event of all these silicon. So anyway, all I could think of was the only reason they would do this. Here's what happened. I went to tried to contact NASA. I don't remember if I got any response. I doubt if I did. And here's what happened. Yale, the next year after I had all presented all this stuff to Yale with my CAT scans, my everything, the DNA, whole 9 yards. But they were giants. This is what freaked them out, was the size of the creatures. But they agreed, exceptional preservation of these soft-bodied creatures from silica-rich oceans. And the silica all came up from the ocean floor. It's saturated with silicates, and that's the only way it came up. And they say it was very unusual, and they have no idea why that happened. But it exceptionally preserved soft-body, but they're not only soft-body, they were everything, because it was nucleophilic substitution due to these biomineralizers, which are the silicates. The silicates working with the transition metals stabilized the fleshy parts, bones, everything. In some places they turned into opal. They replaced everything with the silicates and the transition metals, and they look like fabulous. Oh, that's what opals are. Okay, Yale had all my research and knew all about this, about the soft-bodied creatures being preserved, exceptional preservation, which now they agree with. And at the same time, about 2014, when Curiosity was up on Mars, I contacted NASA, and I said, I can see biology all over there. They're the same as my mud fossils. I never got a word from NASA. What they did, apparently, was contacted Yale and talked to Briggs, because I said I talked to Derek Briggs at Yale, and here's you have. So they must have got a hold of Yale because they funded this. They funded this. Why would they want to know about soft-bodied creatures? This is all funded by Yale, by NASA. NASA Astrobiology Institute. And this is exactly the time when I was sent it to Astrobiology Institute to Briggs. We are grateful. Well, they misinformed NASA as well, because they said this was all just soft-bodied creatures. There was no bones, there was no nothing. I have some of the mud fossils here right now that have transitioned and still have bone in them. And some of them are from giants, and some of them are from normal-sized humans. They were everywhere, and everybody's finding them now. There's no more mystery about this. Now it all comes into play. I finally figured out what happened there. NASA must have got a hold of Yale to say, is the guy crazy? He's saying there's fossils up on Mars. Is he right? And they obviously told him the guy's a nutcase, I'm sure. I'm not involved in any of this citations. I gave all this research to Yale. I told them about the high silica contents, about the Great Flood, about this particular layer, about the soft-bodied creatures, how they preserved, and I called it fascia facilitated fossilization way back then, because the fascia was the key. And they didn't even know about fascia. Fascia, I discovered fascia. Well, not fascia. I discovered the interstitium, which is the fluid-filled highway that nobody's ever seen before. And I get no credit for that either. So I got no credit for this. I don't care about the credit, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm just, I would love to be acknowledged as understanding this stuff and not an insane person. That's all I care about. I don't want any money. I don't want anything. But we are being misled by the ones that you trust. Yale, as far as I'm concerned, did a very, very terrible, disgraceful thing here. And they also misled NASA, because they are up there with soft-bodied creatures all over Mars. It was the same as Earth, and Venus almost hit Earth, created all of these things on Earth, these exceptional preservation in this one thin layer. Worldwide, ocean layer was worldwide. It was an ocean everywhere in the world after the flood. And all of these silicates were brought to the surface. They're heavy. They normally weigh down in the oceans. They were brought to the surface. And that's why this one event had this extreme silicon content, which created all the mud fossils. Silicon is a biomineralizer. All right, it turns biology into minerals by attaching to other things that are in the body, which are biological things, primarily transition metals. A lot has to do with transition metals, because those are the things that flow through your body anyway. And when you die and you're still in the wet and you're still in the transition metals, and then they add the silicate to it, you got the transition metals with the silicate creating stability. It's basically stability, biomineralizer. It stabilizes. And all of this stuff I sent to Yale years before that. I had it all figured out. I had it figured out why everything turns into feldspar, ALSI, aluminum silicates. All right, that's feldspar. Aluminum silicates, 100% of everything that's aluminum silicates is feldspar. And it boils down from the phosphorus, phospholipid bilayers, which is I call it fascia facilitated fossilization, because the phospholipids boil down to become aluminum silicates. So the phospholipids are the fascia. The fascia boil down to become the aluminum silicates, which coats every organ in your body. And now it is a new organ system. I discovered that as well. And I am excluded from science, basically. Very disturbing. And I blame Yale for all of this, because everything that I did from then on, they said, you're right, and I am. I'm 20 miles down the street from Yale, basically. And I said, well, they won't talk to me. And everybody said, well, that's because you're an idiot, because Yale would love to be into this. I said, no, they won't. They can't stand this, because it points towards God. And then they just all laughed at me. And the first thing out of Derek Briggs' mouth was, what are you, some kind of creationist? And at that point, I didn't even know what he was talking about, because as far as I was concerned, I was just looking for giants, and I found them. And then I started looking into the Bible stuff about what that said. And of course, creationism came up, which destroys Darwinism, and it destroys everything they said. And that was the first words out of his mouth. What are you, a creationist? And at that time, they were firing people for talking about this. Mary Schweitzer got in a lot of trouble. Mark Armitage got fired. He sued. He prevailed. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is, as far as I'm concerned, and you should understand this is the biggest discovery in human history. The biggest discovery in human history since Jesus Christ. And nobody would accept this ever without the evidence. And I presented the evidence, and still rejected by the ones we trust. Trust no more. Certainly not Yale. All right, the other papers, they make it all mumbo-jumbo technical. This is the Yale News, and boy are we smart. October 2016, cementing a theory about sea creatures of the Ediacaran biota. All right, they make up a name for a certain layer, which is this layer, which is the Great Flood layer. That's all. They made up a new name. They call it Ediacaran biota. Now, Earth's earliest community of complex sea creatures lived in a warm, slimy, planetary petri dish that nurtured a broad array of exotic species. Earliest. Now, listen to this very, very, very carefully. Earth's earliest community of these sea creatures, these complex sea creatures, lived in this warm, slimy planetary dish, and it nurtured a broad array of exotic species. Yet we likely wouldn't know about it at all, scientists say, if not for a quirk in the chemistry of ancient oceans. And the whole world was an ocean because it just was almost impacted by Venus, which disturbed all the waters on the Earth and brought up all the deep sea layers which contain all those silicates. They wouldn't have known about it except for the silicates, all right, and the chemistry. Now, they're calling their Yale-led research team, which took my research. They found that the Ediacaran biota, which is this layer that they named just because they wanted to name it, there was a collection of marine fossils found in sandstone. No, it's in mud. And it's all around the world. Everywhere around the world, 100%. There's no place that wasn't touched by this flood. It recorded the operation of an unusual mechanism that preserved impressions of the creature's soft bodies for hundreds of millions of years. That's also nonsense. It was not that long ago. Velikovsky had all the details on this. They destroyed him just like they tried to destroy me, and they will not succeed this time. And they say the findings appeared in the journal Geology. This was in 2016, now in October 2016. I had already written a book, had my DNA, my CAT scans, everything was done by then, and all presented to Yale, to Derek Briggs. Now, the Ediacaran biota takes its name from a fossil deposit in South Australia. They're everywhere in the world. I'm 20 miles from Yale. Why don't they call it the Middletown biota? The fossils of that Ediacaran biota are found worldwide, everywhere, in rocks ranging in this age. That's totally nonsense. They are not that old. Everything I have is on the surface of the Earth, just sitting on the top. So this is ridiculous. The creatures themselves were small, also wrong, as few millimeters and large as 1 meter. Well, 1 meter is 3 feet long. I have a fingertip of a giant that is 1 meter long. And they lived in dense, diverse communities on the seafloor. And the whole world was a seafloor, so yes, they lived everywhere because the whole oceans covered the whole Earth. And that's because we were almost impacted by Venus. You have to read Velikovsky, who they destroyed. The same people destroying me destroyed Velikovsky. And the worst one was Carl Sagan. He was just a nasty, he just savaged them. All right, now many of these creatures were outright bizarre in appearance. That's correct. And they do not resemble any organism alive today. They were wiped out by the flood, yes. And that was said by Lydia Tarhan, a postdoctoral fellow at Yale, first authored a study. Now, in quotations, we would like to understand their relationship to the complex animals evolved shortly thereafter. Are the Ediacaran organisms some sort of failed evolutionary experiment? Are they some sort of failed evolutionary experiment? Yes. We can't live with all these giants. We can't live with all these monsters. We can't live with all these dragons. We got to wipe them off the face of the planet. This evolutionary experiment failed. Let's send Venus to destroy it. Yes, it was a failed evolutionary experiment. Lydia, was it a failed evolutionary experiment, or do they include ancestors of the animals that subsequently colonized the oceans? They included parasites from giant creatures that went into the ocean, yes, Lydia, and they became what we call the sea serpents. Now listen to this. A big part of the answer involves figuring out how these fossils were able to form. The animals themselves were entirely soft-bodied. Totally incorrect. That's just ridiculous. They were nucleophilically invaded and substituted, so they look like they're just turned into rock, which they did. The bones are not there anymore in most cases, although, like I said, I'm going to show you in a microscope, this still has a taste of bone left. And that is, no doctor in the world could look at that and say, that's not a bone. There's not a single anatomist, doctor, and even a kid, a 10-year-old, would say, yeah, Daddy, that's a bone. And I'll show it to you. They say that these were before any life that we knew of existed, basically. All soft body. They lived before the evolution of shells, teeth, bones. Before. They lived before the evolution of all that, they're saying, which is totally ridiculously nonsense. And those are the only things normally we find to become fossilized, because they haven't looked. Now they're looking and they're saying, well, this happened, but it only happened to some wormy little things. No, it happened to gigantic creatures. And the same things that are around here today. That's some kind of waterfowl. I call him Augustus Caesar, Caesar Augustus. There's his feather pattern on the head. There's the feldspar that they talk about, coats everything. Inside, it's not a bones anymore. There were bones around here somewhere. But that's his neck. It just turns into stone. That's what's called nucleophilic invasion and substitution. They should have somebody that understands chemistry at Yale, I would imagine. They should have someone that understands nucleophilic substitution, I would certainly imagine. But I don't know if they do. I really don't. I see nothing but incompetence at Yale, absolutely incompetent. Now, what the researchers realized was that the oceans during the time were much richer in dissolved silica than they are today. Absolutely, Lydia, they were. Okay, so they're looking for where did all the silicon come from? Well, guess where it came from? It came from the deep ocean floor. These silicon, they call it siliconaceous ooze. It's in marine silica sinks. It's way down in the bottom of the ocean, which was all disturbed. All right, it makes up approximately 15% of the ocean floor. So it's way down there. It never comes to the top. That's why it wasn't normally up there. Some unknown mechanism brought it to the surface. No, the mechanism is known. It was Venus almost impacting Earth. So don't forget, the researchers realized the oceans at that time were much richer in dissolved silica than they are today, which is what I told them this. I said it was saturated with silica. It enabled the transformation of loose sand, the mud, basically. Sand is silicates. Sand is SiO2, with impurities and inclusions in it. But sand is basically silicates. That's where all the silicon came from. Now, around the anodes, it turned around the anode. This gets so frustrating. Let me just start again here. What the researchers realized was that the oceans during the time of this Ediacaran biota were much richer in dissolved silica than they are today, because they were disrupted from the seafloor to the surface. It enabled the transformation of loose sand around the animals into rock to occur over a matter of hours, rather than the usual time frame of thousands to millions of years. It also, which I mentioned to Yale. Now this is in quotations again. The Ediacaran were rapidly buried by sand during underwater storm events. An underwater storm event is because we were almost impacted by Venus, and all of the underwater of the entire Earth was underwater, and it was all covered by the Great Flood, and everything drowned or starved to death or boiled, because the process of Venus almost hitting Earth caused the seas literally to boil, the oceans maybe. I don't know about all the oceans, but it certainly in the impact zone was so hot and so furious that it would cause like a billion nuclear explosions at one time, which also accounts for the radioactive elements that they're finding here and there. Mohenjo-daro, they say, was just gone within hours, basically. Everybody just disappeared. I believe they were vaporized, and they now are finding nuclear debris there that they say could have only come from atomic bomb blasts. Well, when you hit the Earth atmosphere with Venus, that is way more powerful than atomic bomb blast. So you're going to have all kinds of subatomic nuclear debris, which is half particles, which is all these radioactive elements. They're all broken into pieces because of that. And that Venus hitting Earth's atmosphere was absolutely catastrophic, recorded in every culture on Earth. And the only ones that survived were ones that got up to the top of the mountains and into caves. Because the radioactive fallout, first of all, the heat, the intense radiation as it was coming down was cooking everybody on the surface. They were trying to jump in the waters, and the waters were starting to boil. And that's all recorded. Everybody recorded this on the face of the planet. And they all had giants and dragons. And that's what this event was about. Jupiter sent Venus to destroy that stuff. All right, and it did, and it went around, and then it wiped out Mars. And that's why I was hooking up with NASA to say, this is what happened, and Mars was destroyed because of this thing. And now I see that they're trying to wipe out some asteroid that's coming. They're calling it the God of Chaos. This is much, much bigger than I had originally thought. All right, so anyway, they say this would happen immediately, and the carcasses were saved, and immediate, perfect, exceptional preservation. So a team conducted research using detailed microscopes. No, this microscope right here, mine, right there, that detailed microscope. And anyway, this is all nonsense after that. And then this guy, Derek Briggs, he's the professor of geology, geophysics, curator of invertebrate paleontology at Yale's Peabody Museum. At one time, I had respect for this place. Now I see it as just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. No interest in anything there that I can find, and certainly not interest anything that's supported by evidence that shows that they may have gotten things wrong. All this is about now at Yale, as far as I can determine, is about self-preservation, basically, because everything they said is wrong. Basically everything. And I've been destroyed from the light research we did, which overthrows all of them. And I've been told that I was a tinfoil hat guy by Fermilab, who I found their particles. And there is no question about that. And I'm not allowed to show that. And I think we can get free energy using the technique that we discovered, which is to separate the muons and the electron neutrinos. And we end up with electron neutrinos, which are nothing but what you want to put in a battery to run your car. And I'm going to show you that, because I'm fed up with all this stuff about being destroyed by this cult that owns us. All right, these institutions own us now, and you have to pay them to become a slave to their demands. And they are demands that you repeat what you're told, or you are destroyed. They'll fail you. They keep your money and fail you. Tell everybody you're an idiot because you couldn't repeat what they said. That's all it is. If you repeat what they say, you're a genius. If you change anything that they say, you're an idiot. If you want to do research, you better go somewhere else and find a place to do it, because you're not going to do it at any of these Ivy League schools. They are nothing but indoctrination centers. They are a place for you to become mental-sided. And I'm going to tell you right now, by people like Derek Briggs, I find him disgraceful. And if he wants to say, Roger, you're wrong, tell me why I'm wrong, Derek. You know who I am. You know me very well, my friend. And I know you very well. All right, I imagine they have a doctor, somebody in there at Yale that understands what a bone looks like, possibly. This is a bone. This is the head of a bone snapped off there. It was a long bone. I don't know what it was. Maybe like somewhere up in here or whatever. It's pretty good size. Not giant, but good size. Now, they would call that soft body creature preservation, exceptional preservation of what looks like a bone, but it would be just jelly to Yale. Well, guess what? That right there is bone. Now, Yale did their research with their microscopes, detailed microscopes. Well, let me show you what I did my research with. Detailed microscopes. Here it comes. All right, there's the bone right there. There's the microscope. It's a telescoping microscope, very advanced. Now I'm looking down at a piece of bone that is right on the very edge that didn't transition. Everything else turned into stone, which they considered was a soft body. Well, here it is up in the microscope. You see that? That's the bone. That's all that's left of the bone. That whole thing was a bone at one time. And that's all that's left, is that one little spot. All the rest is transitioned to what they would call from a soft body creature. There was no bones, no teeth, no shells, no nothing. And this was supposedly before any of the fossils they know about now existed. So my stuff is before fossilization. But they just don't understand how it happened. It's nucleophilic substitution. Yale, look it up. Nucleophilic invasion, nucleophilic substitution, primarily driven by transition metals in aqueous solutions. All right, Yale, look it up. All right, they admit all of the stuff that I'm saying happened with the Great Flood, the silicates, the salts, the whole 9 yards, the worldwide flood, rapid precipitation, instant petrification, basically. But here's what freaked them out. They were exactly what it said in the Bible. They were here to destroy all the giants. This is a hair follicle. You see that? That's the erector pili muscle right there. It attaches, makes your hair stand up on end. There's the hair shaft coming up the top. All right. This is the sebaceous gland right there. And that's the root ball, and that is the blood supply, the vein and artery. This is nucleophilic substitution. This is not, normally this would be different colors and different materials and so forth. The hair would be different from the sebaceous gland. But when it gets invaded, as you can see, it's basically all looks like the same stuff. That's nucleophilic substitution. New stuff came in here through the membrane. The membrane is the key. It allows things to penetrate into there, and then they stabilize what's inside of here using the biomineralizers, the silicates basically, and transition metals. And so whatever was in here was invaded probably for quite some amount of time and stayed wet for quite amount of time, and it was just completely invaded. Now this, same thing with this. But this particular piece of bone must have been down in the mud a little deeper, and it didn't get transitioned as quickly as everything else, and all the stuff flowed through there, because everything else is 100% transition into basalt or whatever it is. It's some kind of igneous rock, but they're all covered with feldspar. That's feldspar. They're all covered with feldspar. And they say if you can find a rock without feldspar, an igneous rock, without feldspar, you're finding an exceptional rock. They're all coated with it, and it's because of the Great Flood. Now this is what killed them. This is what caused them to run away and hide and scream and probably cry in the closets. All right, and this was another one. This is DNA tested. This is DNA tested. That's a human fingertip. It's 3 feet long, 36 inches from here to here. This little pad right here. This little piggy went to market. All right, this little piggy went home. Now, this is the little pad that bumps up against your next bone. I couldn't help myself. There's your vein and artery. This is the fingernail. I mean, it's absolutely flawless, and it's well cared for. This is the thing. It's not bad. And this was where I had to smash the piece off here to get down into where the blood is. And that had fingerprints on it. Right? And there it is right there. There's the fingerprints. You see that? And it came off just like this, just like you peeled it right off. I smacked it with the hammer and it popped right off. I was surprised. I was thinking I was going to really have to chisel it. I just whacked it and it just popped like a scab. Almost just like that, lifting it right off. And underneath it was just saturated with blood. I mean, it wasn't wet, but it was brown, rusty looking blood. You just drill it out of the arteries, and there's arteries all over these things. The fingertips are just absolutely saturated with blood. That's why I got fingertip blood out of this one and the other one. And this one is the big one. This was a 3 foot long fingertip. That fingertip's 3 feet long. This hand here is a little smaller. This is a 4 foot wide hand. And if you take your hand and lay it back like this, you're going to have that tendon right there. All right, look at your hand carefully. This is a left hand. Lay it back. This is the pad, your bumper pad. This one runs down to your little finger. All right, this little, this bumper pad. This is the cleave right there, right in between your palm. This goes off to your thumb. This is the grip skin. Remember I showed you the grip skin and I popped off the big finger? This has the same stuff, and it's peeling off because it is a different type of material than the underneath, the substrate. The substrate is fleshy. This is just like rubber. And you can see it in the grip skin over here. This is what, I don't know, I call it grip skin. But they call it keratinized cells, cornified skin, epidermis, all kinds. They have all kinds of names for it. But it's a fingerprint in this case. All right, here's another one. This one also was DNA tested. The big hand, the 4 foot wide one, was DNA tested. The 3 foot long fingertip was DNA tested, and this was DNA tested. All human. All of them came back human. And this one here was, it's just flawless. I drilled down in here somewhere to take some red blood out of there. You just have to take a little pin drill right down where there's a lot of blood, and you can find it. The blood is everywhere. This one here leaked blood out of it. That's another lung. And you see that little latch right there? I call that the spurlock. It's a different material than the rest of the fascia. They don't know about this in medicine yet. They didn't know about the fascia the fluid-filled highway either. I discovered that too. This is the spurlock on this one. See it? It's a different type of material. And it attaches to the next organ. So this is unknown now. The fascia, the interstitium was just acknowledged as the biggest organ in the human body. Now, probably one of the, well, I know for a fact it is the most important organ in your body. It coats everything with a membrane, and if that membrane is penetrated, that's when you get cancer. That's why there's over 400, or there's 200, 400 types of cancer, something like that, because every organ can get penetrated. You penetrate through the membrane, you get cancer. You penetrate through the membrane somewhere else, you get colorectal. Somewhere else, you get bladder cancer. Somewhere else, you get lung cancer, skin cancer. It's cancer of everything, because everything has a separate, different, distinct type of membrane. And if that membrane gets invaded, you're in trouble. And how do you stop it from getting invaded? You need enzymes. Where do you get the enzymes? From bacteria. Why don't you have the bacteria? Because you probably took some antibiotics or had some kind of invasive chemistry in your body that killed a certain type of bacteria. And if you don't have that bacteria, you have what they call a pre-existing condition. If something tries to invade you, there's nothing there to stop it. And then you get invaded. Now, then you get inflammation and you get all kinds of sickness and whatever it is. And if you can't have something in your body come in and help you, then you end up dying. These are these invasive diseases, and it really boils down to primarily they're rewriting the DNA playbook. Well, they should, because it's not right either. Junk DNA is not junk. Anyway, there's so much that is wrong. It's just incredible. And it's like Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time. The top guy that runs the thing, he's got to somewhere die off before somebody comes along. And you can't step up and talk about it and still stay in the business. They'll throw you out. The only reason I can talk about it is because I have no skin in the game. I don't care. People call me stupid, they call me an idiot, call me crazy. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Well, it does bother me, but there's nothing I can do about that. But that doesn't make me retreat. Now, most of the people that are in business, they don't want to, even like they said, you mentioned this at your workplace about this, you could lose your job, literally lose your job for talking about this. And you absolutely lose it if you're in academia or in medicine. And you're talking about somebody talking about this kind of stuff. The guy's got to be crazy, and if you're talking about it too, you're crazy. And we don't want crazy people around here. We don't want to have them discussing this crazy stuff around us. And I understand. I have people all the time telling me all kind of crazy things. And I know they're crazy. Because I look into them. I look into everything anybody... If I make let me put it this way. I don't look into everything. But what I do make comments on, I have looked into deeply. I don't make comments on things that I don't have information on and I don't have a good grasp of. And I have a very good grasp of virtually everything in science now. And let me show you what we did figure out with the light experiment and denied to be able to present it by these arrogant scientists that are in control. And they're destroying our country, and we could probably get free energy right now. You see that these are transition metals, and all of these different metals go through your bloodstream, picking up and delivering things because of these oxidation states. Well, when people die, or when something dies in this great flood situation, this heart was invaded by silicates. Opals are silicates with inclusions. What these inclusions are depends. In this case, it's all transition metals. This comes from the Yoa region in Australia. And they call them Yoa nuts. And all they are is organs. And they cut them open and they got all kinds of stuff like this. Now, I have a heart here. I have to look around for, I have two of them that are what they call water opals. This is a transition metal opal, which has all the transition metal colors, which I just showed you. And the reason they form exactly like this in certain areas is because that's what that particular layer of tissue needed to become stabilized and turned into literally biomineralized. All right, that's why they're all different. And here you can see it was laying on its side like this. This was down because transition metals are a little heavier than the plasma. The plasma lifted to the surface and the transition metals went to the bottom because your blood is 100% saturated with transition metals. Oh, here's that heart. Hold on. This one here is one of mine. It's opal. And that right there is the ventricle wall. That's the aorta. There's a little tiny taste of blood left in this, but this has transitioned completely into silicates because it was an area where it continued to wash out with clean water, but it's heavily invaded with silicates, and the silicates just replaced everything. Like the Mitchell Hedges skull is real. That was a real, true crystal skull. It was just like this. But it was replaced with every single bit of it was replaced with silicon. But you can see all the nerve fibers, the fascia, and because all your nerves are coated with fascia too. Everything is coated with fascia, and that's the stuff that preserved pretty well. So anyway, there's so much to learn about this. And it just goes on and on. Okay, so as I said, I'm in communication with Yale, and I'm telling them all about my mud fossils, and then I saw this from NASA about the NASA Curiosity rover finding these things on Mars and making jokes out of it, calling this the Mars crab. Nobody could explain it. I can fully explain it. What this is an artery. And these are the blood vessels of the artery. That's the vein. This is muscle tissue. These are sarcomeres. This is a blow-up of that. All right? That provides the blood to service these muscle sarcomeres. This is the eroded, red, fleshy stuff that's in between the sarcomeres that makes them pull in and out. That's the muscle tissue. And here's what it looks like in an anatomical look right here. These are those little connective tissues here, and these are all the breaks where it breaks down in between, because those are the red fleshy things. The red fleshy stuff here erodes between these. When they're pulled together, or muscles pulled together, it's like this. That's how they work. They're sarcomeres. Now, let's go back to the crab. These are those sarcomeres. The red stuff just erodes out of it because it's just dust. It turns into dust. There's not enough moisture on Mars to retain the red fleshy stuff that's near the edges. It just comes out like dust. But again, this is the artery. You have to have a ton of blood to supply into muscle tissue to make it work. So that's the Mars crab. So I contact NASA about this, and I said, you got a Mars crab, you got Mars Morse code, which is fascia. This right here, that's fascia. All right, that's skin, literally skin. Right below that is, well, it could be skin, it could be from a coating on an organ or something, I don't know. But it could very easily be skin. And this is gathered, this is gathered, this is stretched. And when it comes back to normal, it should look like this when it's done. This is interstitium. These little balls are the enthesis points where they attach. And then the straps can pull, but they always come back to where they're attached. These are like little springy things. You see them, how jiggly they are here? They can goo around and go this way, go that way, go this way, any way they want. Now, the reason I know 100% for sure this is on Mars is because of the texture of this surface. That is virtually sandblasted. There's no moisture on Mars. All of the things that I show from curiosity, I'm certain they're from Mars because there is no erosion from any type of moisture. If you don't see that, there's no place on Earth that gets no moisture ever. This has not had any moisture for who knows how long. It's sandblasted. It's like somebody came up and that's what happens. And that's why it eroded these long ones, because this is on a hill, apparently, a little bit of a rise. And all of the cheap stuff gets eroded away. And you end up with those balls. They're called the blueberries. And you want to see those? Again, this is up on Mars. This is interstitium, which is this stuff right here. You see that? And the reason it's so big is because we got the same stuff here on Earth. This right here is the same exact same stuff. These are all the balls, and this is the fleshy stuff that's underneath the balls. I mean that the balls are inside of, and they're just all eroding. This is the Moqui marbles, identical to the Mars blueberries. Now I reported all of this to NASA, and I don't remember. I can't remember what I got a response. They didn't respond. I don't remember. But the next thing I know is Yale is writing a paper about exactly what I presented, and it's funded by NASA. So my interpretation of this is Yale just took my paper, took NASA's money, and handed them exactly what I said, because it is exactly what I said. I'll show you. And mine was a year before, and my book was a year before, because I was so upset from their lack of engagement from a really prestigious Ivy League institution. And then I decided, well, I'll go all the rest of them. Same thing happened everywhere. Everywhere. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a racket. It's a racketeering. They should call it racketeering. That's exactly what it is. This is inside your body. And that's the fluid-filled highway up there. That I discovered that too. And this is inside your body, is all these tiny little balls. And that's where they are. It's underneath your skin, and it brings everything back together. I think I've shown this pretty well. These are bigger because it's just a bigger creature. And then the ones on Mars, the same thing. I don't know how big this is. I don't have a scale for it, but I know it's pretty good size. And this is the Mars Morse code. There's no difference between Mars and Earth. Mars has a gigantic creatures. Earth has a gigantic creatures. No difference whatsoever. And Mars was hit right here by Venus and scraped right across Mars. And this is serious. This is wider than the United States. This is a major impact, and that destroyed their atmosphere, caused all this havoc, and wiped out everything on Mars, basically. Once the atmosphere is gone, there's no life. You have to have water. You have to have that life. Water is life. No water, you ain't got no life. Now, you want to see a membrane? Here's a membrane for you. These are bilipid phosphomembranes, and I understand the phospho breaks down into aluminum silicates. It's just the nature of boiling it down, and they created these membranes. So the membrane stayed. Phospholipids turned into aluminum silicates, which is feldspar, and that, my friends, is a membrane. In us, they couldn't even find these. They didn't even know they existed until just recently. And they know they existed because I told them they existed. Because I could see them in my mud fossils just like this. You want to see a membrane? Here's your membrane for you. Hold on. Where's my membrane? What happened? There it is. These are the ion channels that let things go in and out to service the tissue underneath. In us, they didn't even know these things were in us until 2018. And this is the thickness of the membrane. Can you imagine the size of this creature? I think this has got to be at least 6 feet or more between the top and the lower membrane. These are all bilipid membranes. That's what it is right here. These are bilipid membranes. And that was the top and the bottom. And in between is this fluid-filled highway that lets all kinds of stuff get through to your body to service the tissues. So I showed you the crab, I showed you the scar, I showed you the membranes, I showed you the Mars blueberries. Did I show you these? These are the Mars blueberries. It's the same as the Moqui marbles, no difference whatsoever. And again, all sent to NASA with great details. I didn't just say, hey, I found them rocks and they're body parts. No, I do things a little more detailed than that. And here's, on Earth, we're just lost. This is a body, piece of muscle. It's in my shop. I found it in my backyard, basically. This is where the arteries are. See these the red ones? That's where artery blood comes running out. Up on Mars, the crab still has its legs sticking out, which came in here to service all these muscles. Now, this is muscle tissue, this is tendon, and then the bone was back up in here. You can't see it. But that's what this is muscle. And they look at this and they say this is millions of years in one picture. No, that's one guy dying and falling over, a gigantic creature. And that is the center of the tendon. Tendons are much tougher than anything else in your body. And that's why this thing's just laying here. Because this is the tendon that attached. Muscle would have been here. The bone would have been over here. And I know that because of that circle right there. That is what attaches it to the bone. And it can still rock this way and that way, but it pivots on that. And this is just as tough as hell. That'll just never go bad. And it's the same thing I had in my muscle right here. This is the tendon. See that right there? That's that circle. And that's that white, big, heavy-duty stripe. And this piece from here to here is what's sticking up in the ocean, because that's the tough spot. You see how it's got pink stuff in there? That's muscle. That's that red fleshy stuff that'll erode away. This stuff doesn't erode away. This is almost completely connective tissue. That's why up on Mars, in the Morse code, in the crab, all of those tiny little plates were connective tissue. All right, but they were in the muscles. You see the connective tissues that are in here? In a tendon, there's no muscle, basically. It's just tendon. You see, there's no muscle in there. It's just tendon, just connective tissues, and very, very thin ones, so that you get a lot of strength, but they can still be flexible and move back and forth like this against themselves. And that way you can twist and do all kinds of things. And the tendon still has the same structural integrity. What haven't I shown you? Well, this is right here. This is the new organ. Right there. I showed you all those little balls. There they are. There they are. And this is the fluid-filled highway. And that nobody knew about. I found that. And I called it a fluid-filled network. And it was a giant system that was everywhere in the body. And because I could find it on every one of my mud fossils had it. They could never see this because by the time they got it, it was flat. In an autopsy, they just looking at it and they thought it was a flat sheet. See, I'm not kidding you. This is it right here. Meet your interstitium, a new found organ. And it goes on every bit of every single tissue in your body, between nerve fibers, between organs, between muscles and tendons, and everywhere. It's the biggest organ in the human body now. All right, because it covers everything. I mean, and if you don't have it in good condition, you're vulnerable. That's the immune layer between everything that wants to invade you and your good tissue. Once it breaks through, you can create tumors and inflammation and cancer, all kinds of diseases. So that's just a little bit about that. Now, what else? Oh, yeah, I talked to you about the light research. You see this here? This is light. That's just pulse red laser. Dip, 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 dip. And all these particles in the air, there's a big ball of magnetism and one tiny little particle. And as that hits, everybody gets excited because they've got to be pushed out of the way. Now, as that thing goes, we accelerated that. You see right here? We accelerated that wave. If you can't see acceleration, I don't know I can't help you. Zip! And it's smashed here at the Venturi, and it's made out of two particles, a black and a white. The black is there, and it's the same particles they find at Fermilab and CERN. They're identical, only we use light, so we're way ahead of them. They started with protons, huge things, and when they smash them, they just get a bunch of trash, and they dig through until they find these, and they said, these are the smallest ones we've ever found. Well, we found them using light, because light is basically what they would consider an elementary particle, which it can't be broken down. But we also proved, yes, it can be broken down. So this is the particles, the same as the particles here, but we have them in light. Now, when that light hit the Venturi, which is this restriction here, the black backed off and the white was able to get through, but not the black. And that white is what we can use to get free energy. That is the only thing. It has no mass, and it has 100% burn. That is the only thing you put in your car or your batteries or anything. That's the energy. It has no weight. Just like if you took your car and it weighs 4,000 pounds, and you have filled it up charged full, and it has 4,000 pounds. You drive 500 miles, you come back and weigh it, it still weighs 4,000 pounds. The white has no mass, it has all the burn, all the energy. The black, right there, literally is the dark matter they've been looking for. It's attached to the stuff that glows. We've never seen it because it's always inside of the glowy stuff. The only time you can see it was when you get down to these particle layers. They found it, they just didn't know they found it. There it is right there. They found it a long time ago. They just didn't know they found it. We find it because we use the light. And it is the smallest particles that exist. And that's right here. This just shows this is electron showers. You look up electron showers. These are supposed to be up into the trillions of electron volts. We separated that for free. Literally for free. All we did was shoot that into a Venturi, which is a pinch point that does exactly what CERN and Fermilab do, only it does it sideways. They do it head to head, and they just bounce off each other. They're very easy to bounce off. Very rare that they hit head to head and bang tight. Ours, there's no way for them to get out. They have to go through that Venturi. Very, very tight restriction. And all of the fields crush together, and the black can't get through because it's a fixed particle. It can't get smaller. The white can get smaller. You see here? Whoops. The white can get smaller. See the white getting smaller and bigger? The black this is the same size. It can't get any smaller. This can squirt right through the Venturi if you tune it correctly. That's the key. So I've been stopped from this. They call me a tinfoil hat guy because I'm not in their club. And that could get us free energy. You see that? These are Higgs fields. They brag about getting, 500 Higgs fields or something in a shot. We could do this all day long, get billions, trillions of them in an hour. Trillions, at least. This is just a clip in time, and all of these are Higgs fields. When they see one of these, they get real excited. I'm not kidding you. And that's the top labs in the world. And I went to the University of Geneva online, and I interacted with the professors and everything. I told them all about this. And they were interested, and after that, they shut CERN down for 3 years to put in focusing magnets, which I said, you have to focus. You're not going to get anywhere unless you focus. You have to focus. And then you have to use CMOS to see these things. Because at first they said, no, you can't see that. You can't see these with CMOS. I said, yes, you can. I said, you can't see them because you're using gigantic particles. And when they hit their CMOS, they destroyed it. So what they put in was hardened CMOS, and now they're able to see these particles. So if I'm wrong, have them tell me I'm wrong. I went to there, and they were interested. So that's all I can tell you. And that's exactly what happened. They shut down. They just came back online 2022, and now they're getting twice as many particle collisions or something. They're pretty happy with the results, but it's nothing compared to this. It's absolutely nothing. And this costs almost nothing. I mean, almost literally nothing. And this goes back to 2012 or 13. Yeah, 2012, I think it was. Rod Warren found this just by accident. He got a new cell phone in 2012, a Galaxy S3. I have one here. I did the same research, but he was so far advanced in this, I didn't have to do it. So. Because I couldn't even imagine how many hours he spent doing this. To come up with all of this, you know, and he'd contact me, I'd contact him, and I'd say, try this, why don't you do this? And he'd come up with all kinds of things on his own, using sewing needles and all kinds of things. So you don't have to be any big genius here to do this stuff. This is very simple stuff, but you have to open your mind. And that's where the problem lies. These people are so close-minded, they have menticide, and they're scared to talk because they know they'll be ridiculed. And that's going to happen, I can guarantee you. But somebody's going to have to be smart enough and be in that field where they can be taken seriously, that they can sort of nibble their way in, and they're just not doing that. They just want to hide out and not talk at all. It's a scary thing for these people to get involved in this. And it's also kind of scary to know that NASA apparently must be concerned about this, because if they went to Yale to ask about this, why would they fund Yale for fossils? And it all happened right after I sent my information to Yale and to NASA from the Curiosity mission. I know it was early. I thought it was 2015, but I think it might have been earlier than that. It could have been because it was 2012 they went up there, so it could have been 2013, 2014. I've had all this stuff done. By 2015, I had papers written and books written and all that stuff done. Every last bit of it, DNA and CAT scans and all that, so it could have been earlier. Now, what this asteroid is, I don't know. It's supposed to be only 1,100 feet across. That's not all that big, especially when you consider what hit Earth last time, which was Venus. It didn't hit Earth, but it bounced off our atmosphere and caused havoc to the whole world. And I either have shown you or I will show you that it boiled up all the silicates from the bottom of the ocean. There's a layer way deep in the ocean they call it silicate ooze or something, and it came up during this global catastrophe. And that's another thing. Yale said, "Wow, how did that happen?" Well, that's how it happened. Venus almost hit Earth. I think I've shown you everything you have to see here. Oh, by the way, if they're looking for gravity waves, why don't you contact me? I can help you with that. Gravity waves are nothing more than magnetism. These are magnetic fields. Gravity waves are just gravity is magnetism. That's all it is. Gravity is magnetism. The dark particles suck the white particles in. And I can prove that too, because the Russians did it in space. See, this goes back to 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. The Russians did an experiment in space where they took charged particles, the little white ones are the charged particles, and they put them into a vacuum chamber up in basically zero gravity. There's some gravity here. That's why it's a little bit flattened out. Otherwise, it would be perfectly circle. Now, they have some gravity, well, even though they're out in outer space. Now, all the white particles collected around the black. The black is gravity. The black is the particles I showed you before. The black is these particles right here. and they suck the white up to them. The white is the energy that makes your car run. The black sits waiting for the white to come to it. Think of it that way. The black sits waiting for the white to come. And when you turn your thing to push your pedal down to make less resistance, it starts to flow. And then it has to push its way through your motors and so forth to get to the black. And it'll push through just like crazy. This white stuff is absolutely phenomenally strong. And we are absolutely creating it for free in enormous quantities continuously from very tiny little devices that could be carried around in a lunchbox, literally. And there's been no connection to a grid. It could be used in war zones and out in the middle of nowhere land, and and we get off of this gas and oil. We have to get off of that. And this stuff is off the shelf and ready to go. If you put a harvester right in here, hold on a second. I show this all the time, but I might as well show it again. I've been showing this now, trying to get through the Fermilab since 2015. And this here is how I would say to do it. You put your restriction here, you collect it and put it through a photodiode and drop it into your batteries or wherever you want. And then you don't even hardly need batteries with something like this, because you just turn it on and it runs forever. And if you could have 10 of these, 20 of them in this car, and one breaks, you just click the other one on, or it just keeps on and it rolls over. Now, something I'm going to tell you. You see this? This is what I went to Fermilab about. I said, I found your particles to Fermilab, because there's your particles. And this is at the exact same time as I was talking to the Russians about this black hole. And I sent this to Don Lincoln at Fermilab, and he sent back that I'm a whack job and don't ever contact him again because I'm a tinfoil hat guy. And I said, well, I got your particles. I got everything. I'm showing you everything right here. And that was it. I was done. And that's exactly how they handle things. It was Don Lincoln and Fermilab. If you go up, he's got 1 million videos on there, on YouTube, and it's just absolute total nonsense. And he refuses to engage, and just keeps spewing out all this nonsense. If you can deny what I'm showing here, somebody's got to step up and get these people to pay attention. It's really, this is a disaster, and this is a government agency. They work for us, and they are just against us as far as I'm concerned. Fermilab right now, well, Don Lincoln anyway, is against any advancement in this, and the government's getting pissed off at them too, because they're going to change the funding out of my hope. They should have done it years ago. We would save billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, and I mean many, many, many billions. And the more complicated and the more circles they can walk around in, the more funding they got. That's what we're up against, my friends.